In just a few days, the situation between the United States and Iran changed rapidly. Attacks happened one after another, tensions escalated, and Iran's ability to defend itself was gradually put to the test. As these operations continued, it became clearer how extensive and powerful the attacks by the United States were. But before we begin, don't forget to like this video. It means a lot to us content creators. Thank you very much, and now let's get started. The United States' operation against Iran began in a careful and planned manner. First, America used the B-2 Spirit stealth bombers to strike the most important parts of Iran's command and control system. The goal of this was to destroy the centers that give orders and coordination to Iran's military. Once these centers are gone, it will be difficult for Iran to control its soldiers, missile units, and other parts of their military. After those stealth strikes, the B-52 bombers followed. These planes are not meant for silent operations. They were used to bomb various targets in Iran, but the operation did not end there. Another bomber, the B-1 Lancer, followed. According to a report from Air and Space Forces magazine, the arrival of the B-1 bombers is a clear sign that the United States has no intention of stopping the attacks against Iran. This was confirmed by General Dan Kane, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. On March 2nd, he told reporters at the Pentagon that this operation is just beginning and will continue. And that's exactly what happened. After the initial attack by B-2 bombers on Iran's command centers, B-1 bombers immediately followed to expand the operation. The mission of these pilots was not easy. Like the B-2S before them, they had to fly for more than 30 hours to reach Iran. At that time, the United Kingdom refused to allow the United States to use several important bases, such as RAF Fairford and Diego Garcia. Diego Garcia, which is in the Indian Ocean, is usually used by the U.S. for refueling and preparing bombers before operations. Because of this, the B-1 pilots were forced to complete the entire mission with almost no rest. Despite this, they were still able to complete their mission. During more than 30 hours of flight, they followed the initial attack of the B-2 bombers and carried out a massive bombing run that caused significant damage to Iran. What exactly did the B-1 bombers do in that operation? According to the Air and Space Forces magazine, they were part of the operation where more than 1,250 targets were hit in the first 48 hours of the battle. The main task of the B-1 is simple but has a tremendous impact: to deliver a massive amount of bombs inside Iran. In a single mission, each B-1 can carry up to 74,000 pounds of weapons and explosives. If 3 B-1 bombers participate in an operation, the total payload could reach up to 222,000 pounds of explosives. This means a huge amount of weapons can be used on a single target in just one attack. This is part of Operation Epic Fury. One of the main targets of the B-1 bombers is Iran's missile sites. This includes the locations where missiles are launched and the military command centers. Once these locations are destroyed, Iran will have a hard time planning and taking action. It was not specified exactly what weapons the B-1S used in this operation, but the B-1 bombers are known for their ability to carry many types of bombs and guided weapons. In other words, almost any weapon it carries can completely destroy its target. For example, if regular bombs are used, the B-1 can carry up to 84 Mk-82 bombs. Each of these weighs 500 pounds. It can also carry heavier bombs like 24 Mk-84 size. Each of those weighs 2,000 pounds. It also has other weapons like Mk-62 mines and Mk-65 quick strike naval mines. But it's unlikely that naval mines were used in this operation because they're usually used at sea. There's a problem with using regular bombs. The plane needs to fly almost directly over the target to drop these bombs. If they do that, The B-1 bombers could be put at risk if Iran still has any defenses left against aircraft, even though many of those defenses have already been destroyed by earlier attacks from B-2 stealth bombers and bombing runs by the B-52. The United States still wouldn't want to bring their bombers too close. That's why the B-1S didn't need to fly directly over their targets. Instead, the B-1 most likely used its capability to launch weapons from a long distance. For example, it can carry up to 24 GBU-31 JDAM bombs. Each of these weighs 2,000 pounds. There is also a lighter version called the GBU-38 JDAM. Each of these weighs 500 pounds. Another important weapon that the B-1 can carry is the AGM-1 58 JASSM missile. The word standoff is important in the name of this missile. This means that the bomber can launch the missile from a long distance while staying in a safer location. The plane doesn't need to get close to the target to hit it. In this operation, thousands of pounds of guided bombs and missiles were released against Iran's command centers and missile sites. After the attack, many of the targets were left with large craters in the ground and burning ruins. According to the National Security Journal, 3 B-1 bombers flew directly from the continental United States for this mission. To complete the extremely long flight, they were supported by aerial refueling tankers positioned over the Atlantic Ocean and the Mediterranean Sea. Because of this, they were able to stay in the air for a long time without needing to land for refueling. Upon arriving in Iran, they entered the country's airspace and launched their weapons. After the attack, they returned to the United States. On their return, they were again supported by refueling aircraft to complete the long flight. The success of this operation was made possible by the earlier actions of the B-2 stealth bombers. The National Security Journal explained the difference between the two aircraft. The B-2 can approach targets even with strong defenses because of its ability to avoid detection. Meanwhile, the B-1 is usually used when the enemy's defenses have weakened or when it can launch weapons from a long distance. In other words, the B-2 first prepared the situation by destroying Iran's defenses. After this, the B-1 came in to carry out attacks from a distance. This became possible because Iran's air defense network was almost destroyed. In this way, the B-1 bomber became like a large flying launch platform. It released a huge number of weapons against targets that had almost no defenses left. Even though the United States' operation was strong, it still needed to be careful. This is why they don't use bombers in the old way of bombing, where the plane itself passes over. Instead, the United States used a sequential method of attack. Different types of bombers were used in the correct sequence to gradually weaken Iran's defenses. It's like each part of the defense was removed one by one until almost nothing was left. Let's go back to the targets hit by the B-1 bombers. According to Iran International, the United States attacks on March 2nd hit ballistic missiles, especially those above ground. The targets also included the command centers mentioned earlier. According to TBN Israel, after the B-1 bombers attack, there were reports of loud explosions near a nuclear facility and an Air Force base in Isfahan, central Iran. Reports also confirmed that the United States continues to strike Iran's missile sites and command centers as part of a broader operational plan. At present, Iran has suffered significant damage. However, according to analysts, the situation for the country could get even worse. To understand why, it's important to know how crucial a command center is in a war. The command center is the place where commanders meet to plan and control military operations. This is where orders are given to soldiers on the ground, ships at sea, airplanes in the air, and missile units. In other words, this is the brain of the entire military operation. When these centers are lost, the military will have difficulty communicating and planning their movements. It's like a body that has lost its connection to the brain. It can no longer move properly. This is exactly what happened in Iran. Because the United States targeted the command centers, the communication and coordination of the Iranian military were almost completely cut off. Because of this, Iran had difficulty giving orders to their units. They also struggled to monitor and understand what was happening on the battlefield. For example, it's extremely difficult to launch a drone or missile attack against United States ships if the systems used to locate and monitor the targets are no longer available. In recent days, the systems behind Iran's military operations were quickly destroyed, and the effects of this were immediately seen. Many command centers have been destroyed, and Iran is also struggling because many of its ballistic missiles are affected. They were hit by B-1 bombers. When these two problems are combined, Iran can now launch fewer missiles. According to a BBC report on March 4, Iran has launched 571 missiles and 1,391 drones since the war began. That's a large number. But there's another problem. While Iran's ability to launch missiles is decreasing, their stockpile is also being depleted quickly. General Duncan said on March 4 that Iran's ballistic missile launches have dropped by 86% compared to the first day of the war. In addition, the number of missile launches dropped by another 23% between March 3 and March 4 alone. These numbers show how significant the impact of the United States' successive attacks has been on Iran's ability to fight. When you include the 73% decrease in drone launches, the impact of the United States' plan using B-1 bombers becomes even clearer. The logic of this plan is simple. When the command centers are destroyed, Iran will have a hard time coordinating missile launches. If the missile bases and launchers are destroyed, they still won't be able to launch attacks even if some parts of their command system are restored. According to the Jewish Institute for National Security Affairs, Iran's current situation is similar to what happened during the 12-day war against Israel in 2025. Because of the rapid destruction by the U.S. and Israel of a large part of Iran's missile launch capacity, Iran can no longer carry out large consecutive missile attacks. They can still launch some limited attacks, however, each attack quickly consumes their remaining weapons. In other words, with each attack, they weaken themselves further. According to reports, up to 73% of Iran's medium-range missiles have been lost. Up to 52% of their short-range missiles have also been lost. And approximately 75% of their missile launchers have been destroyed. This means Iran has been hit by two consecutive problems. First, they were forced to use a large number of missiles at the start of the war. Second, the U.S. and Israel are gradually destroying the launchers, and they have already taken out several of them. As more launchers are destroyed, Iran's ability to retaliate also decreases. Even if they manage to make new missiles in the future, if they lack launchers, it will be difficult for them to use these on a large scale. At this point, it's clear that the situation of the war favors the United States, but that's not Iran's only problem. As the fighting drags on, the United States is expected to send even more B-1 bombers. When those arrive along with the B-52 bombers and fighter jets, they will be able to operate more freely inside Iran. According to the National Security Journal, the United States has already achieved air superiority over Iran. But according to them, it has gone beyond that level and has become air supremacy. In an interview with David Petraeus, former director of the CIA and former commander of U.S. Central Command, he said that the United States can now fly various types of aircraft over Iran. This includes stealth aircraft such as F-35 fighters and B-2 bombers. They can also use more powerful bombers like the B-52 and B-1, which are capable of carrying a large number of weapons. He added that at this point, the United States is not very concerned about Iran's defenses against aircraft and missiles. As long as the planes stay at an altitude beyond the reach of heavy machine guns, they can continue attacking continuously. If that's the case, it's clear that Iran's missile-based air defense is almost useless. This means that United States aircraft, including bombers and fighter jets, can almost move freely in Iran. Meanwhile, because so many missile launchers and missile systems have been destroyed, their capability is now limited. With each of those attacks, they have almost no ability left to defend themselves against America. The B-1 bombers played a major role in this situation, and it's likely that this won't be the last time these bombers will be used in the war. As the attacks by the United States continue, it's clear that this is no longer just about bombs or airplanes. This has also become a battle of how long a country can endure under continuous pressure. In just a few days, the situation in Iran changed rapidly. Many of Iran's military facilities were destroyed, many bases were hit, and its ability to launch large-scale attacks is gradually weakening. Meanwhile, the United States continues to send more planes, ships, and forces around Iran. This shows that America is ready to continue the operation until it achieves its objective. In the history of war, there are moments when a country has to make difficult decisions. They may continue the fight even as the situation worsens, or they may try to find a way to end the war before it causes even greater harm. For now, it is still unclear which direction the government of Iran will choose. There are reports of tension within their leadership. There are also statements that show they are seeking support from other countries. But at the same time, some attacks from the Iranian side are still continuing. This shows that the fight is not over yet. Many countries around Iran are carefully observing the events. They do not want the war to escalate further. These countries know that if the conflict spreads, more countries and more people could be affected. There is another reason why it is important to monitor this situation. Iran has long had connections with some powerful countries in the world. One of them is Russia. In recent years, Iran and Russia have cooperated in several areas, including energy and the military. In the war in Ukraine, Iran provided drones that Russia used in several attacks. Because of this, the relationship between the two countries became even closer. But if the government of Iran is further weakened because of this war, it could lead to changes for some countries in certain areas. But for Russia, that would be a big change. Russia could lose one of the countries it often considers an ally in the region. The influence of the United States and its allies could also grow stronger. This is why Moscow is carefully monitoring every development in the war. For now, Russia is not directly intervening in the conflict. But it's clear that the outcome of this crisis is important to them. While all of this is happening, American ships and planes continue to arrive around Iran. The aircraft carriers at sea serve as bases that can launch dozens of planes at any time. With each passing day, Washington's message becomes clearer. Their operations will not stop until the situation in the Iranian government changes. But in war, things don't always go as planned. There are unexpected events. There are decisions that can change the course of the entire battle. And sometimes even a small event can cause a bigger crisis. Because of this, many analysts say that the coming weeks will be the most important. During that time, it will be determined whether the war will continue in the same direction or if there will be a change in the situation. In this situation, it's not only the military that is affected by the war, it also has a significant impact on the economies and daily life in many countries. One of the first things the world feels when there is tension in the Middle East is the increase in oil prices. This region is important because a large portion of the world's oil comes from countries around the Persian Gulf. When there is war or tension in this area, oil companies and the ships transporting crude oil become more cautious. Sometimes some ships stop passing through routes that may become dangerous. When this happens, the amount of oil reaching the global market decreases. When the supply is lower while the demand remains high, prices naturally go up. This is why even countries far from the war can feel its effects. For example, the prices of gasoline, transportation fares, and some products that use energy in production or transport may increase. It's not just oil that's affected. When there is a major war in an important part of the world, investors and companies also become more cautious. Some stock markets may go down because of fears that the situation could get worse. There are also companies that temporarily stop some projects when they think the risk is too high. In this way, a war that started in one place can have an effect on the economies of many countries. Another important thing to watch out for is how other countries around Iran will respond. There are some countries in the Middle East that have had tensions with Iran for a long time. But there are also countries that do not want the war to escalate further because their own security and economy might be affected. If the conflict escalates further, some countries might be forced to take sides. If that happens, the situation will become even more chaotic. In the history of many wars, this kind of tension sometimes remains only between two sides. But there are also times when it gradually expands as more countries get involved. This is why leaders around the world are carefully watching every move of the United States and Iran. They're not just thinking about the current conflict. They're also considering what might happen in the coming months or years if the tension continues. For now, it's clear that the United States has a significant advantage in technology, air power, and its naval forces. But this doesn't mean that the war will end quickly. In many instances throughout history, even a country with a stronger military can still face a long and difficult battle. This is because war does not depend solely on the strength of arms. It is also important for a country to have the ability to continue the fight, adapt to the situation, and find ways to regain lost strength. For Iran, the current situation is a major challenge. Some parts of their military facilities were damaged. Their ability to launch missile attacks was reduced, and they continued to experience pressure from United States forces. But on the other hand, it's also not easy to predict how Iran will respond in the coming days. In a crisis like this, the decisions of leaders can change the course of entire wars, and they can also de-escalate the situation. But it can also further escalate the tension in the area. Because of this, concern remains high in many parts of the world. While military operations continue, countries, analysts, and various organizations also continue to monitor what is happening in the war. Every new attack, every statement from leaders, and every movement of military forces can provide clues as to where this crisis is headed. For now, no one knows how long the situation will last. But one thing is clear. This war is not just a local conflict. This is a crisis that could affect a larger part of the world. The conflict between the United States and Iran is not just an issue between two countries. This is a crisis that could affect many countries, the world economy, and the situation in the Middle East. And as the attacks continue, one question becomes increasingly important. As the situation drags on, with each passing day, the conditions in the area continue to change. As the attacks and movements of military forces increase, fears continue to rise about where this crisis might lead. How much further could the war spread? And if this kind of pressure continues, how long can Iran remain resilient?